acceptance.
I think a lot of this can kind of relate to this scenario. You're having a dream, and I mean, you are in it. Your heart's racing, your pulse is really going, right? You're about to have your big moment in your dream, and the other person is there, and maybe you're angry at them. And you got a finger going, and maybe you even got a hand on your hip, right? And you are really about to lay it into them because you cannot believe, again, you are dealing with this thing, and you're just about to have your big moment, and suddenly, beep, 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 your alarm. And then your other person, maybe they might be there next to you. They just go, oh, good morning. Oh, don't you good morning me. Right? Your heart is still racing. Your pulse is still going because it's not necessarily something that they've done, right? They were just sleeping. They were resting. They weren't in your dream, but your body had that experience. You had the physiological experience of it, the memory of it. Or how about this one? Here's another one. Who has done this before? Because I've done it. There are 4 kids in my family. You're sitting around with your family, and it's one of those family stories that your family tells every time they get together, right? And you've heard it so many times that you're sitting there and you're sitting around telling them all about it, and you're on your bike and you had the money in your hand and you're riding the bike, and then suddenly you got distracted and the coins fell and you skinned your knee, and your brother goes, hold on, wait a minute, that was me. That's my story. I was the one who was riding my bike. I had the money in my hand. Mom sent me to the store. Why are you taking my story, right? And it's not anything really that you intended to do, but you have this false memory imprinted into your nervous system, into your neurological pathways, just because you've heard it so many times that eventually, well, what happens is we center ourselves in that story. Our brain is capable of creating these false memories and these experiences that never actually really happen to us. And so when stressed, especially, we lock into the way we feel, and our memory becomes supportive of that stressful situation, and these emotional attachments, they can hold us back. So when stressed, we store our memories differently based on the neurotransmitters that are happening, based on the muscle memory that comes to us, or the surrounding experiences. And so with lots of help from highly trained professionals, I've learned ways to navigate stressful situations by processing my memories better and releasing emotional attachments that are holding me back. And so I've learned how to change the way I think, change the way I process, change the way that I learn. And I've done this by improving my memory, understanding when it's reliable, when it's not reliable, and how to make it serve me even when it's not accurate. So today I want to share some of the stuff that I've learned about improving brain performance. And as always, please take what applies to you and throw the rest away. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a neurologist, but I do have a lot of experience overcoming personal trauma. And while I'm not going to get into any of that today, I've come to realize that the stories that I tell myself and the stories that I tell others, they can be the chains that bind me, or they can be the keys that release me from the trauma that I aim to overcome. My name is Christina Aldan. I'm a brand strategy consultant, a speaker, a trainer. I'm based in Las Vegas. I sit on the board of directors for a STEM nonprofit and also for a mental health awareness foundation. If you want to continue this conversation online, please use #LuckyMemory. This is my 10th Devoxx conference. It's pretty cool. I want to say thanks so much to Devoxx Poland and sponsors for having me. I've been to Morocco and the UK and the US. I've been to lots of Vox Days conferences as well, so it's really cool to be here. So our memories, they hold the key to improving our communication. They help us learn. We can improve on our emotional intelligence skills if we improve our memory. It helps us be open to the viewpoints of others and to take in information better and learn from others, and also to set healthy boundaries, even for people who often don't respect those boundaries. So you can see how, as a brand strategy consultant, somebody like me, I'm trying to connect products and services in meaningful ways with customers all the time. You can see how this information would be helpful when we're talking about how we encode, how we store, and how we retrieve memories. Memory, it's the faculty by which the mind stores and remembers information, something remembered from the past. It's a recollection. And what we know about memory today is that memory is the process that we use to encode, to store, and to retrieve data from stimuli, lots of different stimuli, internal and external stimuli. That affects our cognition, that's how we think about things, and it also affects our behavior. This is our observable responses. And so our brains are always taking in information, stimuli, regulating our blood pressure, our sugar levels, anything from our environment, right? Our digestion, our breathing. And what we call memory is really just a whole bunch of memory subsystems that work together, or they can also work independently of each other, and they're constantly processing data so they can function together independently. Here's the thing, memories are weird. Memories can be compressed. Who has done this in the last couple of years? You go, oh yeah, the last time you were over for dinner 6 months ago. Oh no, actually, Christina, that was a year and 6 months ago. Right? COVID just has completely wiped away our timeline, and people have a COVID brain, they're getting brain fog, they're getting memory lapses, and this is because our brain has this quality where memories can be compressed. If the stimuli are the same day after day after day, our brain wants to constantly work toward efficiency, and it just goes, yeah, that was 6 months ago. Actually, it was a year and 6 months ago. It's just that the day has been the same over and over and over again. And so 2020, 2021, it just flew by because our brains have compressed those memories. And so it's our emotions that control those memories and that narrative that we attach to the memory. And so we can't give our brains more processing power. We can give our computers more processing power. But we can learn how to store and encode and retrieve information better, more efficiently. And so these are some of the ways that I've learned to do that. If you just focus on any of these strategies, in the next 3 months, just take 3 months to focus on one thing, you're going to learn how to improve your capacity for learning. Maybe let go of that brain fog that you might be experiencing. Improving how you learn and store information. So take a look at this. Today we're going to look at how we store, how memory systems work, the different types of them, the biological storage, how can we improve our memory daily, how we can improve our confidence. Confidence is really important in our memories. If we see somebody at work and we remember their name, right? We want to be observed remembering somebody else's name and remembering things that we just recently learned because we appear more confident, and that helps us in our career. Also for emotional intelligence is our EQ, our emotional quotient, as opposed to our IQ. Emotional intelligence takes in our intuition and how we process things. And then also it helps with conflict management. So conflict conflict is inevitable, right? And so we can use memories to set healthy boundaries with people who might not be so open to respecting those boundaries, right? There are lots of different ways to deal with conflict. There's this way, there's that way, and there's every way in between. And so I try to wobble in the middle. If I understand the options that are available, then I'm able to make a more informed choice. So Bauerich and Ebbinghaus, they both conducted some research in 1984, and what they learned is that most of our forgetting, it starts early, right around 3, 4, 5 years old. That's when our memory subsystems start to be developed. They start to form. And there are two types. We've got declarative and non-declarative. And so we have, for example, a memory subsystem for long-term memory. We have a memory subsystem for short-term memory. And memory consolidation is something that kind of takes a couple of those memory subsystems together, and while we're sleeping, we can strengthen those synaptic connections between neurons structurally and chemically, and that's how we learn over long term at different time intervals. So let's talk about declarative memory. This is your conscious memory system, and it involves effort, it involves intention, and we can use intentional techniques like repetition, mnemonics. This is how we can improve our declarative memory, and biologically, the hippocampus and the frontal lobes, they manage our declarative memory. So our declarative memory system, it can be measured with explicit tests, right? Coding tests, we see those. Aptitude tests in schools. So there are 3 different types of memory subsystems. The working memory. This is 2 to 18 seconds. You have 2 to 18 seconds to commit information to our hippocampus, the immediate mental connections. This is where the old data collide with the new data. So this is how we can do on-the-spot math, right? And so the ability to take in that new information biologically, it's governed by vasopressin, that is the neurotransmitter. Then we have our episodic memory. This is where events are stored. Specific episodes. Wow, I remember that one time at Devoxx, Poland, when Christina gave that amazing keynote, right? It's an event. This is where we remember our wedding day. This is where we remember specific events, our episodic memory. And then we also have our semantic memory. Our semantic memory is where our general data are stored. Any kind of facts, for example, if I have a red ball, and I throw it all the way back to the back of the room, our semantic memory does not attach a narrative to that. Our semantic memory says, okay, was the ball red? Did she throw it? Okay. However, if you are somebody who experienced the ball whizzing by your head, and there's a narrative attached to that, that's not semantic memory. That's not where that information is stored. Next, we have our non-declarative memory. This is your unconscious memory. It's just automatically, inherently there. It's implicit. Biologically, in the parts of our brain, the cortical areas, the cerebellum, the basal ganglia, this is where the non-declarative memory is governed. And so people who suffer from amnesia, for example, they might have damage to their cerebellum or their basal ganglia or their cortical areas. And so we can prime our memory to improve it. Priming is when there are cues, specific triggers that are going to cause a person to remember something. So, somebody might walk by with some perfume, and it'll remind you of your grandma, right? Cookies, banana bread, something like that, your mom's favorite recipe. And that, our emotions, they're going to drive the narrative for your priming your memory. Next, we have conditioning. Pavlov's dog is a perfect example of this. Anybody who's heard of Pavlov's dog, where he rang the bell and he fed the dog, and the dog would salivate, and he rang the bell and he fed the dog, and the dog would salivate, and pretty soon all he had to do, right, is what? ring the bell, and the dog would salivate. And that's conditioning. So we can condition our brain patterns using things like hypnosis or neurolinguistic programming. We can condition our brains. And then there's the motor procedural memory, and this is how we learn to commit a task to memory through repetition, right? Like a golf swing or dribbling a basketball over and over again. And so when we have these different memory subsystems and they're stimulated, what happens is they start encoding, storing, and retrieving the data all together. And sometimes they don't work together. Sometimes a memory subsystem might be isolated and it's not activated. So if you're taking a math final, let's say you might be using your semantic memory subsystem to pull forward the formula. All right, you got that, the data. You've memorized the formula and the algebraic equation. Cool, but guess what? Your working memory is not online. It's not going to help you. Maybe you suffer from ADHD. They often have issues in that 2 to 18 second moment. Maybe you're just panicking and you're having an amygdala hijack, right? And your brain is like, nah, forget it. I'm not going to give you that information right now. Or, you know, for people who have panic attacks, people who are struggling with COVID brain, this is a real thing, you know, where you might have the information, you know it, but now that you're in the meeting and you're sitting there with your boss or your team, you just can't recall it for some reason. And then on top of that, people use their senses. They use different inputs and different stimuli to trigger those responses. So maybe you're more of a visual learner when you learn math, and so maybe you're more of an auditory learner when you learn math. Maybe you're more of an associative learner. Maybe you need to have your favorite hoodie, conference hoodie, and when it comes to math, this is your comfort level, and you're like, well, I study with my hoodie, and so I'm going to take my test with my hoodie because that's when I learn best, and this is when I take the test best. So the goal, at the end of the day, is to get your brain to organize the information in a way that's most beneficial to you, because there are 7.8 billion different ways on the planet to do this. But our brains lie, unfortunately. And the more rigid that our beliefs are, the more distracted that we are. We live in a very distracted world right now. The more our brains are going to lie. And so how do our memories deceive us? Well, over and over again, for example, forensics teams, they'll tell us that eyewitnesses are not really good at remembering an account of an information because we're forgetful. We have false memories. We trust our eyes, but we don't trust our ears. And so if you're struggling with connecting with others, as an example, and I mean really connecting with others, I don't mean like, oh my God, you know, I'm in quarantine and I'm so bored, and not like really you have a difficult time connecting with others, you know, you could fall into a victim mindset. And then from that victim mindset, you can start kind of ruminating. And then from that rumination, you can go back into the past and you can start replaying old events that happened through the lens of victimhood and create new false memories over those old memories. Over and over, studies show that we're totally capable of isolating and even dissociating from memories altogether. Sometimes how we remember things depends on our focus, what we're valuing. And so if you go and see the new Avengers movie with your friend Jane, and you love it, and you had a great time while you're at the movies, and you just go around talking about it for weeks afterward. And 3 weeks later, you bump into Jane. And you go, hey, Jane, did you see the new Avengers movie? It was so awesome. John and I went. We had a fantastic time. And you're going on and on, talking about the awesome new Avengers movie. And she's like, are you kidding me right now? That was me. You went to the Avengers movie with me. Why are you saying you and John? Because you weren't even focused on who you went with, but you were really focused on the movie. And so what happens is your brain fills in that friend spot and substitutes Jane out for John, for whatever that spot was. Interruptions are something that really it's one of the number one things that affects our memory. And so retroactive and proactive interference can really cause problems. This is the number one issue for us when we're trying to learn something. And it's important to note that if the interruption is not significant enough, then it's not going to affect you. However, if it is significant enough and you just have to finish up an email, you just have to write that one last text, I do the finger technique and I do, hold on just a minute. Just give me 5 minutes to finish this email. Just give me a quick moment to finish this text, to wrap up this whatever, and then we can talk. Because otherwise, you're going to lose that information and you will not remember it. So different types of interruptions are going to affect how you remember things. Because at the end of the day, what you see is really not what you get. So when it comes to memories, what you see is not always what you get. Eyewitness accounts, remember, are not always the best evidence. It's been proven over and over again and replicated in laboratories all around the world because brains lie. And so we can improve our memory. It's totally possible. We can improve our capacity for learning, and we can do it by improving how we encode, store, and retrieve data thanks to neuroplasticity. Who's heard of neuroplasticity here? The quality of neuroplasticity, exactly. Yes, a lot of people. This is great, about half of you. Neuroplasticity is the ability to change and form new neural pathways. This is awesome. We have a saying that says, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And that's a lie, because actually you can teach an old dog new tricks. And the way that we do it is through neuroplasticity. So if the stimulus is strong enough or repetitive enough, if the stimulus is strong enough or repetitive enough, it essentially deepens that pathway, deepens the groove. You get more myelinated sheaths, more nerve bundles, more connections at the synapses, more protein synthesis at the connections. When we stimulate that neural pathway, we strengthen it by lots more activity or repetitive stimuli. And so for me, when I was a little toddler, there I was crawling around my grandma's floor, and I found one of those hairpins, those metal bobby pins. Everybody's seen those? We have a 110-volt outlets in the United States. And so I was crawling around, picked one of those up, and zzzt, it's the perfect size to stick into that outlet. How many times do you think in my life I have stimulated that neural pathway? Once. That's it. If the stimulus is strong enough or repetitive enough, we will remember it. I guarantee. I've never done that again in my life. And so just as we remember, neuroplasticity also tells us that we can forget. Just as we remember, we can also forget. And so as my French teacher used to say, if we don't use it, we lose it. And this is why, of course, that I can only say, est-ce que tu une cravate? That's the only thing. I studied 3 years of French, and all I can say is, are you a tie? That's all that I remember, because I haven't spoken French in forever, right? And so if you're not stimulating those neural pathways, what will happen is they'll start to dissolve. And so this is how we change habits. You hear things like 21 days to change a habit, right? It's because those neurological pathways, they will disappear because our brain's always optimizing for efficiency. It's always trying to improve brain performance. So really quickly, let's just talk about how we process memories. We have shallow processing. This is, our physical observations. And then also we have deep, elaborate processing. And this is when we add purpose. We add meaningfulness. There's some kind of an attachment to that memory that creates more elaborate connections and associations. Chunking information with existing knowledge is another way to process memories in a deeper way. And this repeated exposure to stimulus or deep processing of a stimulus means that you're going to get a stronger imprint on your memory. And so there are a lot of different ways to encode, to store, and to retrieve memories. And what that means, of course, is that extroverts are going to respond differently even to the same stimuli than introverts will, right? An extrovert is going to respond better to a very assertive, in-your-face kind of experience, whereas an introvert is going to back away from that and reject those data, and they're not going to remember it and save that information as well. Here are some tips from Dev Nikima. She posted this on Twitter. Front load the data. I need time to process and respond because I'm not an on-the-spot thinker, right? We can also make asynchronous collaboration possible because my brain's not always lit up and ready for output. Allow me to communicate in text. Communicating in text, for some people, is a lot easier than audio communication. Also, real-time meetings are a lot to process at once. And I'm already short on working memory, she says. I'm bored, and it's taking everything I have just to stay focused and listen for understanding, especially during COVID times, right? We're very distracted right now. Maybe we're taking care of a sick family member. Maybe we have a lot of appointments. Maybe we're recovering ourselves. So here's a summary of all of that. And, understanding this, it really helps support everyone on the team, not just the extroverts, not just the introverts. And so they can perform a lot better on the job because not everyone incorporates those same processes to encode, store, and retrieve the data. So just remember, I'm not a doctor or a counselor, so if you have serious challenges about this stuff, then you should definitely consult a professional and not a brand strategy consultant. But let's talk a little bit about encoding memories. So we can focus our attention on patterns of fear or fun, or what makes us happy. We can train our brain to look for happy moments or threatening moments. Our brains are really, really good at looking for threatening moments. We don't have to try for that. However, if we decide to maybe count how many happy moments that we see in a day, we start to train our brain to tune in to the happy instead of the threat or the fear. And so maybe you can play a game with yourself, and every single day you say, I am going to try to count one more happy moment than the last. And if you don't observe any happy moments around you, then what you could do is you could create some, right? Appreciate the sky, appreciate the colors or the gorgeous weather around you. You can feel the warm sun on your face. Simple little moments like that will help start to train your brain toward looking for the happy. So it just depends on your focus. The other thing that you could do is you could do a slow and low oh. And so when you take a big inhale and you let it all out, this relaxes your nervous system. And so when you do this, you pause, you examine your surroundings, you take a moment. In fact, it changes up the neurotransmitters that are flowing through your nervous system. And so you're going to be much more open to receiving information, receiving that data. We can create our own opportunities through this. We can create our own luck. And so even if you try one of these techniques for a few months or for yourself or for your team, you can even do it with your relationship with your boss, like to get better results, then it's totally worth it for me to share these strategies that I use. You can improve encoding by this trick, and I'm from Vegas, right? And so we love card games in Las Vegas. What you can do is take the card memory technique, look through a deck of cards, turn them over, and try to practice remembering the order of them. And so when you practice remembering the order of them, you encode the information better. Your brain starts to learn. You're teaching your brain to encode data better. And we can use the memory game, for example, to practice training your brain. So you can look and do the memory game, and you can do things like, where are all the white cards? Where are all the red cards? And you can flip everything over again. Where are all of the cards that don't have a black background? Whatever that is. And then you can try to recall them. The other thing we can do when we're encoding is we can bring action to it. Action releases more of the noradrenaline hormone, and this is for our episodic memory subsystem. And so if you have a wobbly kid like I do, and he's always wobbling and moving around, then you'll see classrooms a lot of times with wiggly chairs or wobble cushions, right? And this is because the environment, the physiological state, the emotional state that they're in, you can reproduce that while they're taking tests. And experiential active learning is a big strategy that's used a lot more these days, especially for kids who don't love the lecture style, right? Here's a good one. This is called Shoot the Thumb. I learned about this one on TikTok. Shoot the Thumb is kind of cool because you actually shoot your thumb. And so you hold some information in your head, a memory, and you follow your eyes as you shoot your thumb. Yeah, okay, I'm getting better at that. I used to suck at this. I'm much better at it now. But you could shoot the thumb as you hold the memory into your head, and what happens is you'll remember it better because this improves your bilateral stimulation, both hemispheres of your brain. And so this is how you stimulate your neural pathway through that bilateral stimulation. The left and the right motor functions are both being used and activated while you hold on to that memory. Another one that you can use, I use this a lot for like my Ignite talks, for pub conferences, and so this is called the spacing effect, where I would write out my talk. They give me only 5 minutes, so it's very, very difficult to remember all of that information in just 5 minutes. So I write out my talk, I read it aloud. So I see it, I hear it, I feel my vocal cords vibrating. Writing at pen to paper also incorporates more senses. And then I look away, and then I repeat the talk. And then I repeat it again after a few hours, and then I repeat it again before bed and sleep on it. Remember I said we can go to sleep and we take advantage also of learning and improving our memory that way through compression. And then when you wake up the next day, after all of that memory consolidation, you'll remember your talk a little more. And so I use this all the time. You can improve encoding just by relaxing. This allows the neurotransmitter vasopressin to be released, and it makes us much more open to receiving new information. And so remember earlier when I said take a slow and low O, do a few of those every now and then throughout your day. And what that's going to do is it's going to help you learn, because the inhalation, the more oxygen, and then also the release, the actually making the low sound releases any kind of tension in your vocal cords and in your body. So when you have a relaxed mind, you're going to learn that information that you're trying to remember even better. And it's with all these small intentional changes that big changes happen. And this is how we can improve our executive function. So those are the ways that we can improve on our memory encoding. Now, I want to talk about storing memories. Everybody has a song that maybe brings you right back to that moment, right? For me, for example, the Rolling Stones, I Can't Get No Satisfaction. It brings me right back to where I was in that moment, right? Maybe it's a wedding song for you. It brings you right back into that moment. And we're storing that information based on the senses that we have. It creates a stronger imprint into our memory subsystem. So we have a sense of sight, sound, smell, touch, taste. We have a sense of time. We have a sense of hunger. We have a sense of blushing when we're embarrassed or we're in an excited state or flushed, right? We have our sense of agency. Here's the thing, though, is that our senses can be tricked. We've got the Museum of Illusions just down the road over here. And so our brains, they can lie. So that's why it's important to incorporate more than one sense into the experience. And it's really important to understand, however, that if you have too many senses, you're going to be overwhelmed. And we call that, in my world, in marketing and branding, we call that a confused mind says no. And so you don't want too much overstimulation, because then people's memories and their brains are just going to shut down completely, and they're not going to store the information that you want. Storytelling helps with our memory storage. Humans love to tell stories. I grew up near Lake Superior, and I grew up with my aunts and my uncles telling just the grandest fishing stories, right? And so they'd start out and the fish would be this big, and then they'd tell it again and the fish would get this big, and pretty soon, you know it, before, the fish is this big in the story, because they've told it so many times, and it just becomes bigger and better and shinier, and it was snowing, it's just big, grand tale. But storytelling is a good way for us to store those memories. And also, it can be a bad way to store those memories. So if you're telling yourself a story that's not really serving you anymore, it's really important to stop and ask, why? Is this serving me anymore? Am I just ruminating on something that's already been worked out, it's already been processed, there's nothing I can do about it? That's important to know, because otherwise you're just locking that story in, you're locking that narrative into your memory subsystem. So it's our hippocampus that retains and stores that data. Remember, we have 2 to 18 seconds to allow the hippocampus to begin storing our memories in that short-term memory system if we want it to be stored permanently, and then activate our long-term memory. And also that bilateral stimulation. Remember, the left and right hemispheres work together. We used to think that we had a left brain and a right brain, and that's not true. In fact, we use different parts and different sections of our brain. This is why we love chunking data, like phone numbers, right? Who's done this before? Or somebody is going to give you their phone number, and you're like, all right, okay, cool. And so you get your phone, and you're ready, and you say, okay, so what's your number? And they go, it's 0170 25121. Wait, no. Just what's the number? Okay, it's 0172 2215. No. Just give it to me like a human and not a psychopath, right? It's 017025551212. Everybody knows, right? There's a cadence to it. There's a tone. We like to chunk our data. And so if you add a tone to it, you're going to even remember it better. Remember, because you're incorporating some of those senses. We like things in chunks, and we like things the same cadence. Everybody knows how to give somebody a phone number. Stop doing that. There are some basic influencing factors. So let's talk a little bit about now some actual techniques for storing information better. Number one is meditating. You can meditate even for just 8 weeks. 8 weeks, and you will grow more brain matter. You'll have thickened brain matter in your skull, in the parts and the regions of your brain that focus on empathy, on regulating your emotions, on learning, and on memory. 8 weeks, even if you've never meditated before, you can get amazing results. So that's really cool. We can improve our storage by getting in touch with feelings. Emotions help us remember. And so an emotional response, however negative, remember, right? However negative or however positive, like falling in love, yeah, that's enough to make those neurotransmitters start flowing in your brain. And so even if something is gross, like envisioning a can of worms, we can think about a can of worms, and we can still be grossed out about it without actually having the worms in front of us, right? This is because we have emotions attached to that memory. And sometimes, even taken to the extreme, you might find yourself empathizing too much with another person, right? This is called hypervigilance. Some people will say, I'm an empath, because you're very hypervigilant about what other people are experiencing, and you don't have the psychological boundaries to protect yourself from others' heaviness. Another thing you can do is association. Remember, you can wear your favorite hoodie. You can have a certain bit of information that you know you're never going to lose, like kids' birthdays, and then attach a memory to that. So when you associate things with existing memories, you're going to store them even better. Here's one. I encourage people to create a little bit of chaos in their lives, because we have these habits where we go on autopilot and we don't even think about it. So there's the story about the Christmas dinner, and everybody comes over for Christmas dinner, and the mom is making the ham, and she's teaching the daughter how to do it, and she whacks the ham in half, and she puts it in 2 pans and then puts it in the oven. And the daughter's like, why did you do that? Why did you cut it in half? And she's like, I don't know, it's just how my mom did it. And so, okay, let's call her up. Let's ask. So, hey, Mom, so why did you cut the ham? I was teaching your granddaughter how to prepare Christmas dinner. We were just wondering, why cut the ham in half? How does that improve the taste and the flavor for the family's secret recipe for ham? And the grandma says, oh, yeah, I just never had a pan big enough. All right. And so, because we're just on autopilot, sometimes we just do things and we don't even realize why, and we lose that information, and we're not really being as efficient or as effective as we could be. So I encourage people to be unpredictable. You can take a new route home, you can walk or bike or take a bus instead. Just do things a little bit different out of your routine and see what you can notice around you. We can improve storage through repetition as well. In marketing and advertising, we say that some people need to see something 21 times before it sinks into our head. The same message, the same information, the same way, 21 times if we want that information to stick for people. And so this is very, very good information if we're selling things and we're marketing things. It can also be very bad information if we want to sell people propaganda, right? 21 or 2100 times over and over and over again, because eventually they start to believe that it is true. Another thing we can do to improve storage is to use better documentation in tech, especially to help us understand why those choices and decisions are made. Not just what was made, but why we made those choices, and also why we did not make those choices. This is important because in the future, maybe we didn't make this choice because the resources weren't available now, but now we have the funding, and so we can go back, revisit that, and now we can move forward with this choice and make a decision that's different. We can also improve our storage by understanding what we value and what we focus. So in the workplace, if you're a manager or if you're somebody who's running meetings, it's important to document those meetings. Who said what, and again, why? Because oftentimes this happens where somebody will bring up an idea, and then 6 months later, somebody else will bring up an idea, and they'll go, oh yeah, that's a great idea. And you're like, well, actually, I thought it was a great idea 6 months ago when I brought it up. And so this happens sometimes because the focus might be on something different. The conditions, the specs, maybe the requirements were not necessary for that at that time. And if we document that stuff and we facilitate the meetings better, then we'll know who brought the idea to the table and how. And the last one that I want to talk about for improving storage is the von Restorff effect. And you can improve your memory storage with the von Restorff effect, which tells us that things that uniquely stand out are going to be remembered best. I used to work in a hotel for a summer back when I was in college, and there was a police officer staying there for the summer. He had a canine dog partner that he was training, and so he was staying in the hotel, and he said, we were having a conversation about speeding and speeding cars in the United States. It's a big problem right on the highway where our hotel was. And he said, actually, I can identify the cars that are red. This was before radar. I can identify the cars that are speeding that are red because his eye was attuned more toward the cars that were red. And he gave out more tickets to cars that were speeding, that were red, than any other color of the car, because that's what his focus was on. So things that uniquely stand out are going to get a little bit more attention. Here is a recap of how we can improve our storage. And so next, the last one is how we retrieve our memories. So the way that we retrieve our memories was studied in 1983. Tolving proposed that forgetting, actually, it's not just a matter of availability and having the information available to us. It's a matter of being able to retrieve those memories that are still locked in our long-term memory. So if you have an actor's name, it's right on the tip of the tongue. You know that guy. He was in the show with that girl, and then she had the hair and the arms, and it's really frustrating when it's just right on the tip of your tongue, right? And so that's an example of not being able to retrieve that information. You know it's in there somewhere. It's just that your long-term memory is not letting it go. Another one, I do this a lot. I walk into my kitchen and I go, what did I come in here for, right? And then you have to retrace your steps. Okay, let's see, I did this, I went here, oh yeah, okay, I need to fill my water bottle. All right, got it. But we all do that. We struggle with retrieving our information, and so retracing your steps and backtracking can help. So there are different types of cues, right, that help us retrieve our memories. And so if we can match those encoding cues with the retrieval cues, that is how we can pull those memories out of our brain. And so the same two people, they might use different cues even for remembering the same information. And you can help improve your memory retrieval by managing your mindset. Like I said earlier, there are 4 kids in my family, and then a cat, we had a dog, and so, when your mindset is being hijacked by your amygdala, maybe you're really emotional, maybe you're angry. My mom used to get really upset, and she'd be like, right, Chris, Sarah, you know who you are, get over here. Like she'd throw the pets' names in there sometimes, because when you're angry, it's really, really hard to retrieve the information and retrieve that memory, even if it's your own kids, right? So our emotions will influence our memory retrieval at a biological level. Another thing we can do to improve our retrieval of memories is intentional recall. And this means teaching it to other people. When we teach something to other people, we learn it better because we can see the gaps maybe that we have in learning the information, and it identifies those gaps as we're trying to teach it to another person. And you can kind of consider, how this is applied to your work. Maybe there's a mentor program at your work, or there's another entry-level person where you want to just teach them the information, and it's going to help imprint those data into your memory a lot better. Things like flashcards, this also helps. Practice quizzes, writing prompts, if you're an author. These are things that are helpful in improving your brain's ability to retrieve information. And unsurprisingly, sleep, discomfort, stress, these all influence our memory retrieval as well. So it's important that we stay healthy. And another thing to understand is that memories can be malleable. right? So you have to bring your observation skills to the table. So maybe there are places in your life, like I said earlier, where you're just on autopilot in that you're complacent and you're not really questioning why you do something. And so maybe it's time to kind of sharpen up those edges of your foggy mind and revisit why you do something and where, so you can really get clear on your memories, the stories, and the legacy that you'd like to leave behind. Here is a summary of that for memory retrieval. And so, as you go through the rest of the conference today, I really want to give you these questions. I want you to think about what you remember from the talks that you've seen. Is there a pattern? Are there certain people that you follow? Are there certain topics that you follow? Are you sticking with a certain room? Why is that, right? Again, you can compare notes and your foci. What are you focusing on compared to your friend? What did they get out of it? What didn't they get out of it, even though you attended the same talk? It's going to show you what they emphasize. It's going to show you the de-emphasis on things and what you value and what they valued from the conference. Also, look at the type of surface processing and the physical details that you observed. Look at what type of deep processing you did. What are the meaningful, purposeful moments that you had? Maybe it was a hallway track experience, or maybe it was a side conversation outside while you're hanging out in the sun. And then what distractions occurred? Were you on your phone a lot? Did somebody come in and out of the lab while you were sitting there really intense in a 3-hour lab trying to figure something out in this distracted environment? It makes it tough to retain information and to focus and to create and to produce. So you would be wise to cut out as many interferences as possible to help you remember information about the conference. So the thing about it is that memory, it can be a really tricky thing, and if nothing else, I'd like you all to remember this. We all Google the things, right? The big secret is that everybody's just so worried about finding out is that we all Google things. We all forget things. It's totally part of being human. And sometimes we even remember false memories, as we've seen. Their memories are constantly being formed, reformed, and also erased. And so you don't have to memorize all the things. Having the ability to think creatively is really where our superpower lies, right? That's where our strength is. Each of us puts our own unique creative way of approaching problems and solving problems for clients. And so it doesn't matter if you have to use the Googles and the interwebs to look up how to do things, right? And so having these coding tests that are just testing only one memory subsystem during interviews, it's not effective. And so how we are applying these tools is so much more important when we're doing hires and interviews. And the same goes for children, teaching them just to remember things and regurgitate things as opposed to apply critical thinking to problems. It stifles their creativity and they lose the ability to make informed choices. So as I stand in front of you here today, I just want to encourage all of you, hiring managers, job seekers, parents. I even want to appeal to the little inner child inside of all of us that how well we do something, it doesn't define our intellect. How well we remember something doesn't define our intellect. It's how we apply that information that matters, right? With healthy boundaries, with empathy, and with creativity, with collaboration. That's how we all grow together. So thank you very much. I want to ask you also one more thing. I wonder if anybody remembers if I was wearing a sweater at the beginning of this talk. Who remembers if I was wearing a sweater at the beginning of this talk, or glasses, or a name tag, or a scarf? And so I want everybody to go through the rest of this conference and just think about the physical observations that you have and how you are applying this information back to your work. Thank you so much. If anybody wants to talk to me, I will be here for a few minutes.